Hello and welcome to the Business of Being an Author. I'm Chris Ashmore. If you've watched or listened to the previous episodes, you'll be aware by now that being a commercial author is not a hobby. It's a business, and that means proper planning, structure, vision, strategy, and so on. And today, Andrew Griffiths walks us through 12 key drivers of being an author. It'll shift your thinking from I wrote a book to I'm building a business around my book. Well, Andrew, there are 12 key drivers of the business of being an author, and the first is the author business imperative. What is that?
To put it really simply, it just means that we've got to treat our business, our author business, like a business as opposed to a hobby or a sideline.
Where do authors tend to get wrong with this?
Well, I think, again, this concept of the business imperative, what I'm really trying to get across there is obviously that message that there are things that we would do to run a business, and anyone who's listening to this or watching this is, probably familiar with what it takes to run a business. But when it comes to writing a book, we don't necessarily apply the same principles or the same thinking. We might have our business model here, and then the book just sits over there by itself and doesn't really work. We don't really kind of say, well, okay, hang on, let's put the book into our business model for starters, looking at that as that piece. So I think it's all of the things that we naturally tend to do in business, from having a marketing strategy to having a sales strategy to understanding all of the nuances of even budgeting or profit margins, all of that kind of stuff that we get from a business. We keep the business, the book sitting over here as opposed to applying all of that same knowledge. So quite simply, that's how I look at it, saying, well, okay, we've got to treat it like a business. So we've got to do all the things that a business requires. Sounds simple, but it's a little bit more complicated than that, I think, for most of us.
A lot of this comes down to the systems, is that right?
I think so. I think that's probably the easiest way to get started around this, is saying, well, okay, so what are the systems that I have in place for something as simple as dispatching a book? Do I make it really a great experience for the reader? If our model is built on getting your book into the hands of as many people as possible, because ultimately that's what's going to help you to sell more products and more services, do I just, it's all haphazard. So I'm going to send a book, but I forget. I just throw it in an envelope. It turns up and it's all battered and bruised. I don't keep track of who I've sent a book to. It's not a part of my system. And so it's an afterthought, a lot of that kind of piece there. So systems are around that. So for me, probably the best illustration of that, Chris, is I get a new client inquiry, my system kicks in. First thing I do, it's an email inquiry generally. My thing is, great, look forward to catching up with you, Chris. Before that call, can I just get your postal address? I'd love to send you a copy of my latest book. I've already got that, Andrew, thanks. Let me send you a copy of another one of my books. They're going to get one of my books from me by hook or by crook. Bang, goes into my system. So now then labels happen, the book gets done, gets packed, then I know that the book will get to them. It's tracked by Australia Post so that I know when the book arrives. I'm catching up with them. I know the book's arrived. Oh, did the book arrive, Chris? Yes. Bang, that's a simple kind of system, but that's one that transformed my business, just having that simple, easy to follow kind of approach. But having that then for all parts of the business. What's my marketing for my book this week? What's my, social media for the book, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, Andrew, what are some of the tactile things this applies to?
So I think, again, if we keep using that example of like sending out books to someone as a system, it's the that business imperative thing of systemizing. I'm sending out a book in advance. For me, I look at that as such an extraordinary moment. So I want to make it when someone actually receives that book that it's an experience for them. So what that really looks like for me is, again, it's not just a book thrown into an envelope that turns up. I go, because anything I do in my business, I want to make sure that it's done in a quality way, it's done in a memorable way, etc. So I have my own cards, fold-out cards printed, and I write a personal message to whoever the book is going to. I sign the book. I never send a book out without it being signed, ever. Because that changes the relationship with the person, because people look for that. The minute they open the pack, they look at, is the book signed? Because it means more when it's signed. It's in packaging that I get custom made. It's custom designed. It's will turn up, and opening it will be an experience. When they pull a little tab, the box will open, the book is there, they'll open the book, there's a handwritten card from me, the message is personalised. It's not just it's hey Chris, can't wait to help you grow your business or whatever it might be. The experiences are all there. And that's also my principle in doing business in general. But I look at the book again. We spoke a while back about mindset, and I mentioned that concept of the book being this great asset. Well, for me, it's like, what's the use of it being a great asset if you don't treat it like one? And this is like that tactile experience with people is like, okay, I want them to get this book and go, wow, that was great. That's now added to my credibility. It's added to my business, etc. So that's what I talk about when I'm saying tactile. Even if I'm going to a conference, for example, and I'm selling, and I do this all the time. I might sell 200 or 300 books. I sign every book. Now, I don't personally sign to everyone who's there because I don't know all their names, but I spend a couple of hours signing books because I want everyone in that audience to get a signed copy. And I've done that I had a conference with 2,000 people. It took me a day to sign 2,000 books, but I signed every one. People notice those little things. They notice those little touches. So, and it's just a part of my overall business philosophy about, I believe, again, someone's got to be the most expensive, may as well be you. I like to live by that philosophy, enough to write a book about it. But the caveat is, but if you're going to be the most expensive, you have to be the best. So I look for attention to detail. I look for these little moments that will differentiate me, but also add to my credibility every step of the way.
Uh-huh. Well, you also say that once you've published a book, you should put your prices up.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I do. I think that's, again, it's a hard one for people to get their head around that, because they go, well, I'm exactly the same coach, consultant, whatever I might be. Our books come out. They can't make that leap between being worth more or being able to charge more. And the thing that I think is such a difficult thing to get when you write a book is you don't feel any different, but people look at you differently. Once you're an author, people look at you in a way that is definitely different to the way before. And I talk to my authors all the time about this, and they go, yeah, I know that difference. Hand someone a book, they look down at it, and when they look up at you, there's a different look in their eyes. There is still enormous respect for people who write books and that author kind of element, especially certainly in Asia, in Japan, in China, when you go to other parts of the world. It's even more so than here. I know for me doing book tours in Japan, it was like you were treated like royalty. But even in places like Iran, where I've done work over there, same kind of element. So I think what we've got to do there is go, well, okay, people do look at you differently. So in writing your book, it's an opportunity for you to say, well, I'm acknowledging I'm an author now. I've done something that's hard and significant. It's appropriate for me to put up my prices. And in that book about charging what you're worth, one of the ways I say to be able to charge more for what you do is to write a book about your topic. So, and I tend to do that. Every time a new book comes out, I put my prices up. And I have done that for 14, 15 odd books now. And I encourage any author that's serious about what they do to do exactly the same.
What systems should authors first put in place before they chase the opportunities? Yeah,
I think, again, it's about getting ready for leveraging a book. So it is something, sometimes it's that simple kind of element of like what I've spoken about there in a bit of detail about just making sure that the process of you actually sending out a book is not not that odorous. It's like it's easy or onerous perhaps. I can't speak English, but I'll invent my own language as we're going. But it's like you're trying to just make things easier. So, sending out books is simple. So it's also, I think it's the other kind of systems that you would kind of build into place there. And look at your existing business model. So, for example, let's say you're a trainer and you run workshops and things like that. Have you built giving out the book as part of your workshop? Is that kind of built in to your system to be able to go, okay, like now that's just what we do. When we kick off, everyone comes into the room and their little, their workbook or whatever is there, and a copy of your signed book is on the, at the top of the book. So we've got to really say, well, okay, let's look at any of the systems that we're utilising that in terms of giving the book out or actually using the book. The other kind of systems to me relate a little bit to things like budgets. Do you have a budget for marketing and leveraging of your book? Do you keep a track of what you spend each week on postage? You've got to kind of understand how you've got to have some kind of sense of control around that as well. Having systems, again, if you do any work in the media, do you have a way that you are able to get your book to them? Now, sometimes that's a little bit harder to do. Have you got other resources at your fingertips, like an audiobook sample, like a chapter sampler, like these other pieces that you could send where someone who's a podcast show host is not going to read 14 of your books, but you could at least give them the insight of what it is. So for me, I have a great system that I use for media anywhere around the world. So if I'm doing an interview with someone from the States, to be honest, to ship a book from here is problematic and slow, and it might take a couple of weeks. I go onto Amazon and send them a copy of one of my books, and they get it the next day in America. Now, it's not as ideal. It's not signed. It's not that, but they get it fast. I got a major project out of New York writing for Inc. I did 400 articles for Inc. And the guy that reached out to me, he emailed me in the morning, and he came to me because down the opportunity tree years ago, I gave a guy a book who then introduced blah, blah, blah. So the opportunity tree flowed. He sent me an email saying, hey, Andrew, you might not remember me, but we met through this, and this. I'd like to talk to you about becoming a contributor for Inc. Before I even responded to that email, I'd arranged to have, I think, 8 or 9 or 10 of my books sent to him from Amazon. And then Amazon was doing 2-hour delivery in Manhattan. And then I emailed him once I'd done that. And he came back to me, CEO of Inc. And he said, okay, you're extraordinary. He said, before we'd even had the conversation, I've got 10 of your books have landed on my desk. And he said, I can't even get people that are in the next floor up that are authors that we want to work with to return a call or to do something. That to me that's over system where they're there. But I also have a system if it's a media interview or a podcast interview, my little checklist, and go, Chris, would you like a copy of my books? I don't really read a lot of books. Send me a synopsis. Do you listen to audiobooks? Sure. Bang, I'll go onto Audible and gift them a copy so that they can actually have the audiobook as well. So those systems that I have in place. So it's like, okay, so I have the business ones like budgets and admin stuff and follow-up stuff and keeping records of books and rah-rah. I have the sending books out to potential clients. I have the getting whatever the media may want, to them. You can see collaboration. I have a collaboration kit. I have a collaboration brochure that I send out with books. So, there's, the whole gamut of opportunities I make sure that I'm really set up for. So I've got a new book coming out soon, Business of Being an Author. Now I'm in the process of making sure I've got all of those systems set up for that new book. Slightly different market, so I've got to make sure that I'm, I've got my budget set. I've got my, all of the same things. How I'm going to need to get my packaging done, my cards done. I need to have my system for media, and just again following that, because a lot of the time, I think authors fail badly in having all of the business part of it done. So what that kind of means is they kind of come across as disorganized or just a little bit lacking in professionalism on that side of it. And for me, I believe that every potential client or every interaction like that on media or whatever it might be, they're doing a risk analysis. So I want to show I'm super organised, I'm professional, I'm on top of it. You know what I'm like. You know, you've worked with me enough to know that, bang, if I say it, I do it. I'm professional. That's my brand. It's not a risk to do business with me. That's the message that I try and get across. And so you might have written the greatest book in the world, you might have published the greatest book in the world, but if you can't get your act together to send it, or if you send it badly, or if you don't, you send out the label and it's got the wrong person's name on it, you don't sign it, all these little things that if we don't get them right, they kind of erode what we're trying to achieve. And that's probably the best way to really sum it up, and to get anyone who's, again, listening or watching this going, that stuff is important. It's like, having a brand or to me, how my book arrives is so critically important, because I get so many books sent to me so poorly packaged that I realise, well, I got to be better. So I'm constantly looking for, how do I do business better as an author?
Uh-huh. You mentioned budget. What does a budget look like for a book?
So for me, and this is probably once the book's done. So if I've self-published and the book is done, that's a separate kind of budget in terms of printing and editing and all the rest of it. I look at my business of going forward, and that really does come down to looking at the cost of sending out books. So obviously the packaging and the shipping and all of those kind of elements. I have a budget that I allocate as well per year for Audible books that I send to people, potential clients. I have a budget for design so that I get promotional material, social media tiles, all of those kind of things updated and done regularly. So if I'm doing a campaign, so for example, I would allocate resources. I might be doing an industry by industry campaign. So if you take my current book, someone's going to be the most expensive, it may as well be you. I can do that for accountants, and I'll have collateral for accountants. Then I'll do lawyers the next month, just coaches the next month, whatever it might be. So I have to get tiles done that make it relevant for them. And it maybe again is, maybe some video done, et cetera, et cetera. So marketing resources, I think, come into it. Marketing help. I have a marketing consultant who works with me on doing that stuff. So there's a budget in there. The other side of that, of course, that's all the outgoing. For me, I have my budget on what I want my books to generate in terms of, yes, book sales, even though we say that's not the main priority, but it's like I want to generate, X amount of dollars from coaching from the books, speaking jobs, etc. So it is, I have a real budget, costs, expected revenue, and I'm monitoring that every month. Am I on track with my sales targets? Am I spending what I'm supposed to be spending on marketing? Because I know if I'm not, that will come home to roost 2 or 3 months down the line. I've got too busy, haven't been doing as much outreach and marketing for my books, etc. I've got to make sure I'm doing that. So how much I'm spending is my little trigger on that as well. Podcast development, it's part of the budget, all of those things, but also personal development and professional development as an author, I build into that budget. How am I getting better? I'm learning skills. Am I investing in training and coaching myself, for people to help me become better as an author and build my business as well? So it really is, for me, just the same as budgeting for a normal business, but it's a unit, I guess. It's a part of my business. And I think from the time that I started to get serious as an author and building a business around it, that was a big shift for me, to the budget, the setting revenue targets, managing my costs, having it as they're all financial, either cost centers or profit centers within the business. That's the kind of thinking I think we need to have.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've covered a lot in this episode.
There's a lot there, isn't there?
How about, can you break it down into, say, 3 action takeaways?
I think something simple for everyone is to do a 1-page kind of business plan. go online. There's plenty of platforms you can find, that will help you say, look, what does a one-page business plan look like for you as a business? What do you want to achieve? Set your stretch goals. What's your revenue target? What's your marketing budget? What's your, the 3 key areas that you really need to work on, whether it be packaging or whatever. But, do that one-page kind of plan. I've got some notes here. Set goals and targets for what you want to achieve in detail. I think that game was a real shift for me, rather than just hoping that I generate stuff. It's like, bang, I want my book to generate $1 million a year worth of revenue. What does that look like? I want, 12 coaching clients. I want to sell 22 people on a group program, all off the back of it. So, breaking that down into, like I talk about my new book, The Business of Being an Author, before I even wrote it, I knew exactly what my product architecture was, what my revenue model is for all of that, what it would cost me, etc. And I was never one of those kind of guys until I started to write books as a business. And the third one for me is to also put your budget together for investing in your book. And we again have spoken about that a little bit earlier on in the series even, but just not being afraid to invest in your book when it's a part of your business. And that is also kind of going again, you've got to bring your book into your business model, not just have it as something that's tacked on the outside. And to do that, that again requires you to think in that way, put it at the center of your business rather than, hanging on its own, and then making sure you've got, right, I need to be prepared to invest in that. All well and true to have it on paper and blah, blah, blah. But you got to go, right, for this book to do what I want it to achieve, I need to invest in it. I'm just saying to do that in a structured kind of a way. So, and I'd probably also add to that just briefly that it kind of changes a bit over time. So when your book first comes out, you're paying for a launch, you're probably, doing some other promotional stuff as well. It's a bigger budget. Then you move into more of a ongoing marketing budget, ongoing kind of, social media and collateral and all that kind of stuff. So it evolves over time, but treat it like a business, not like a hobby.
Thank you. And that ends this episode of The Business of Being an Author with Andrew Griffiths. To learn more or to contact Andrew, please visit andrewgriffiths.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.